Hello everyone, I'm RINZ and AMPON. I'll explain to you the introduction of one of the chapter of the well-ended reactor, the technology as form of life. Early days of manned space travel comes a story that exemplifies what is the most fascinating about human encounter with modern technology. Orbiting the Earth aboard Friendship 7 in February 1962, astronaut John Glenn noticed something odd. His view of the planet was virtually unique in human experience. Only Soviet pilots Yuri Gagarin and German Titov had preceded him in orbital flight. Yet, as he watched the continents and oceans moving beneath him, Glenn began to feel that he had seen it all before. Months of simulated space shots in sophisticated training, machines and centrifuge had affected his ability to respond. In the words of chronicler Tom Wolfe, the world demanded awe because this was voyage through the stars. But he couldn't feel it. The backyard of the event, the stage, the environment, the true orbit, was not vast reaches of the universe. It was the simulators who could possibly understand this. Synthetic one condition generated in the training center had begun seem more real than the actual experience. It is reasonable to suppose that a society throughout committed to make artificial realities would have given a great deal of thought to the nature of that commitment. One might be expected, from example, that the philosophy of technology will be a topic widely discussed by scholars and technical professionals, a lively field of inquiry often chosen by the student at universities and technical institutes. One might even think that the basic issues of this field will be defined. Its central controversy were warned. 6-volume Encyclopedia of Philosophy, a recent compendium of major themes in various traditions of philosophical discourse, contains no entry under the category technology. Neither does not work contain enough materials under possible alternative headings to enable anyone to piece together an idea what a philosophy of technology might be. Sure, there are some writers who have taken up the topic. The standard bibliography in the philosophy of technology lists well over 1,000 books and articles in several languages by 19th and 20th century authors. But reading throughout the materials listed shows, in my view, little of enduring substance. The best writing of this theme comes up as from a few powerful thinkers who have encountered the subject in the midst of much broader and ambitious investigations. For example, Karl Marx in the development of his theory of historical materialism, or Martin Heidegger as an aspect of his technology of ontology. It may be in the fact that the philosophy is best seen as derivative of more fundamental questions. Despite the fact that nobody would deny its importance to an adequate understanding of human condition, technology has never joined epistemology, metaphysics, aesthetics, law, science, and politics as a fully respectable topic for philosophical inquiry. Engineers have shown little interest in filling this void, except for airy pronouncement in yearly presidential address at various engineering societies, typically ones that celebrate the contributors of a particular technical vocational to the betterment of humankind. Engineers appear unaware of any philosophical questions that their work might entail. Is it that the philosophy of technology has never really gotten underway? Why has a culture so firmly based upon countless sophisticated instruments, techniques, a system remains so steadfast in its reluctance to examine much its own foundations? Much of the answer can be found in the astonishing hold the idea of progress has exercised on social thought during the industrial age. In the 20th century, it is usually taken for granted that the only reliable source for improving the human condition stem from its machines, techniques, and chemicals. Even the recurring environmental and social ills that have accompanied technological advancement have rarely dented this faith. It is still a prerequisite that the person running for public officer swear his or her unflinching confidence a positive link between technical development and human well-being, and affirm that the next wave of innovation will surely be our salvation. The reason why the philosophy of technology has never gathered much steam. According to the conventional views, the human relationship to the technical things is too obvious to merit serious reflection. The deceptive reasonable notion that we have inherited from much earlier and less complicated times divides the range of possible concern about technology into two basic categories: making and use. In the first of these, our attention is drawn to the matter of how things work and of making things work. We tend to think that this is a fascination of certain people in certain occupations, but not for anyone else. How things work in the domain of invention, technicians, engineers, repairmen, and the like who prepare artificial aids for human activity and keep them in good working order. Those not directly involved in the various spheres of making are thought to have little interest in order to know about materials, principles, or procedures found in those spheres.
Hi, good day. My name is PAMELA Josephine F. ANIÑON, and I will be discussing the makings and the use of technology. Technology is the use of scientific knowledge for practical purposes or applications in our everyday lives. So basically, whenever we use our scientific knowledge to achieve some specific purposes, we're using technology. The patterns in making are the practitioners alone, and the patterns they use is its occasional, non-structured occurrences. Further discussion is deemed irrelevant. In the broadest sense, technology extends our abilities to change the world, to cut, shape, or to put together materials, to move things from one place to another, to reach farther with our hands, voices, and senses. We use technology to try to change the world, to suit us better. The changes may relate to survival needs such as food, shelter, or defense, or they may relate to human aspirations such as knowledge, art, or control. But the results of changing the world are often complicated and unpredictable. They can include unexpected benefits, unexpected costs, and unexpected risks, any of which may fall on different social groups at different times. Anticipating the effects of technology is therefore as important as advancing its capabilities. In return, science eyes and ears are provided by technology, as well as some of the muscles. Like for instance, the electronic computer has allowed researchers to make significant advances in the study of weather systems, demographic patterns, gene structures, and other complicated systems that would not have been conceivable before. Measurement data, collecting data, sample treatment, computing, transportation to study sites such as Antarctica, the Moon, and the ocean floor, sample collection, protection from dangerous materials, and communication are all made up possibly by the technology. And throughout technology, new equipment and procedures are being produced at an increasing rate, allowing numerous lines of scientific research to advance. However, technology can supply more than simply instruments for science. It can also provide motivation and direction for theory and investigation. The notion of energy conservation, like for example, was largely created in response to the technological challenge of boosting the efficiency of commercial steam engines. The technology of genetic engineering, which both makes such mapping possible and provides a rationale for doing so, has driven the mapping of the locations of the whole set of genes in human DNA. As the technology advances, the linkages between it and science get stronger. In other domains, such as solid-state physics, which deals with transistors and superconductors, the ability to build something and the ability to research it are so intertwined that science and engineering are difficult to distinguish. New technology typically necessitates new knowledge, and new investigation necessitates its technology. Modern technology has been a way for multifunctional devices like in a smartwatch and in your smartphone. Computers are increasingly faster, more portable than ever. And so with all of this revolution, technology has also made us our lives easier. Like what I said earlier, it is also a faster and becoming a better way for gaining more fun of the people. Technologies are not merely a human activity but also a powerful forces and sources to our community. So cites a recent portraits by San Diego where Los Angeles eventually everyone travels by a car of young men enjoying long walks at night here in the city of San Diego. This group automatically arrested by the police because of its such suspicious character. So a criminal court rather ruled, however, that merely traveling by foot is not a crime, but yet it is a very important not simply to see that kind of a discrimination. Significant alterations and patterns of human activity already taking voice and observed to an ever-mutating process of human activity, so that they become taken for granted and are integrated into our view of what is natural or inherent world they become, or the second nature, as what Wiener taking after with Einstein turns they become a forms of life. We do not ponder the recurring patterns of lives and activity to tend to become an unconscious processes taken for granted. So there is, however, one point in which we may become aware of a pattern in shape that the very first time to encounter it. So Langdon caused a situation where his students want him and told that this paper crashed that isn't Langdon was familiar with. So he realized that his student was asking him to recognize a new world of parts of thesis and to acknowledge appropriate practices and expectations that hold in that world. In his times, a number of activities that employ computers as an operating medium have been legally defined as crimes. So the law had to stretch and reorient its traditional categories to encompass inexact problems, creating to hold a new class offenses and defenders to so many computer crimes are committed as stealing money and valuable information. Although financial gain is not always an objective, and in fact, some of the most notorious incident computer crime involved hackers seeking bragging rights by overcoming government and corporate cyber security. So in 1986, a Congress passed the Computer Fraud, where this law has amended the technology as advanced and continuous to form the basis for the prosecutions of computer-related activities.
Good day, dear listeners. I'm Ioness Encarnacion, and I'm going to report the paragraph 15 to paragraph 21. The world continues to evolve, and so has technology. The ways in which technical devices tend to create new and unique worlds of their own can be seen in a more familiar case. Let's say, for example, there are two men traveling together. One man is driving a car and the other is just walking. When you think about it, both of them had an advantage and a disadvantage. The man who is walking will be able to enjoy his walk to where he is headed to, as he has the freedom to do whatever he wants to. But it might take him a while to arrive to his destination. On the other hand, the man who uses his car might arrive earlier than the man who is walking. But he may not enjoy his ride since his mind is focused on driving and tries not to get distracted with anything. Technology may innovate, however, this may cause a sudden gap of communication to the interaction between people. Imagine a situation of two next-door neighbors. The man who drives an automobile observes his friend strolling along the street and wishes to say hello. He slows down, honks his horn, rolls down the window, sticks out his head, and shouts across the street. More likely than not, the pedestrian will be startled or annoyed by the sound of the horn. In some cities, such as Los Angeles, where the physical landscape and prevailing social habits assume everyone drives a car, the simple act of walking can be a mere cause for alarm. The U.S. Supreme Court documented one case involving a young man who enjoyed taking long walks late at night through the streets of San Diego and was repeatedly arrested by the police as a suspicious character. There is really a difference between the world of the driver and the pedestrian. The point here is that because of technology, it may somewhat arise an accusation to an innocent person. What is needed here is an interpretation of the ways, both obvious and subtle, in which everyday life is transformed by the mediating role of technical devices. Innovations may have an impact in today's reality. By the means of technology, the various aspects of modern life is constantly transforming. Even the way how we perceive things, how our own ideas and habits, and how we socialize have all been reshaped dramatically as a result of modern technological advancement. For instance, whenever there is a release of a new gadget, of course, especially to those who are techie, they will definitely be curious about its features. Personally, I am not really fond of these things, but whenever I need to purchase one, I research about its specifications and whether it is suitable for me or if it is worth it to buy such expensive gadget. It is stated in the article that the idea that technological innovation is the basic cause of changes in society, and that human beings have little choice other than to sit back and watch this ineluctable process unfold. But the concept of determinism is much too strong, far too sweeping in its implications to provide an adequate theory. Technological innovation is one of the causes of changes in our society, as our world continues to evolve and we can stop these things from happening, and that this is why we have social scientists, whose role is to discover, analyze, and interpret the social implications of technology advancement. They have tried to develop methods of technology assessment. The strength of these methods is that they shed light on phenomena that were previously overlooked. But an unfortunate shortcoming of technology assessment is that it tends to see technological change as a cause and everything that follows as an effect or impact. As we all know, when there is a cause, there is always an effect. A somewhat more farsighted version of technology assessment is sometimes used to predict which changes are likely to happen. Like, for example, the social impacts of computerization. By the use of technology, it will make human works easy and simple. Computers may be also used as a medium to educate the children. The fact that our world is constantly driven by technology, whether we like it or not, we need to embrace it.
Good day, everyone. I am Churchill D. OPACO, and I will continue the discussion about technologies as forms of life 22 to 29 paragraph. So we have already begun to notice another view of technological development. Technologies are being built and put to use in human activity and human institution. The very act of using this kind of machines, techniques, and systems available to us generates patterns of activities and expectations that soon become second nature. Langdon loves these concepts of forms of life and philosophical investigations. Ludwig Wittgenstein argued that speaking of language is a part of an activity or a form of life, whether he meant to suggest that these are patterns naturally occur to all human beings or they're primarily cultural inventions that can change with time and setting. Technological somnambulism is a concept used when talking about the philosophy of technology. The term was used by Langdon Winner in his essay Technology as Forms of Life. Winner puts forth the idea that we are simply in a state of sleepwalking in our own with patience with technology. Ludwig was one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century. Ludwig made a major contribution to conversations on language, logic, metaphysics, and also ethics, which is the way that we should live in the world. According to Ludwig, the form of life that individuals share encompasses the concepts that they organize and whirl into the language they use to communicate, as well as their cultural practices and values. And so if Ludwig is a relativist, he has to be a relativist on both the cultural and cognitive accounts. As technology becomes woven into the texture of everyday existence, the devices, systems, and techniques we adopt shared their tools-like qualities to become part of our very own humanity. Most changes in the content of everyday life brought by technology can be recognized as versions of early patterns. It is important to ask, were modern technologies added fundamentally new activities to the range of things human beings can do? What and how have innovations in science and technology become to alter the very conditions of the life itself? There are some accomplishments of modern technology, like the air flight, even beyond the numerous breakthroughs that have pushed the boundaries of human actions. However, lie in certain kind of changes now on the horizon that would amount to fundamental change in the very condition of the human life itself. Most of the transformations that occur in technological innovations are actually variations of very old patterns. The view of technologies as forms of life Langdon's proposing has its clearest beginnings in the writing of Karl Marx. What Karl Marx means is that a total lacking of any interpretations that find social changes a mere side effect of technological innovation. Basically, humans produce their means of substance by the nature of means of substance they find and have to produce.
To wrap up, these are the takeaway points in my presentation. Technologies are being built and put to use in patterns of human activity and human institutions. The view of technologies as forms of life Langdon is proposing has its clearest beginnings in the writings of Karl Marx. Wittgenstein argued that the speaking of language is part of an activity or of a form of life. And lastly, most changes in the content of everyday life brought on by technology can be recognized as versions of earlier patterns. So thank you everyone for listening, and next to me is Ms. Perez to continue the discussion about the chapter 1 of the book entitled The Whale and the Reactor.
Hello everyone, this is PEREZ, JEVEN, and I will discuss the concluding themes of this chapter. Karl Marx argues that the development of forces of production and history holds the promised development of many-sided individuals in all human beings. Basically, this means that if one has all the means and the access to the materials, they will develop the qualities of this particular activity. If a person holds the tool for woodworking, they will develop the human qualities of woodworking. It no longer sees it as a chore rather than an activity to further enrich the individuality of all human beings. Marx also argued that this can end the constitution of capitalism as applied to understanding of technology. The philosophies of Marx and Wittgenstein direct our attention to the fabric of everyday existence. Wittgenstein points to the vast variety of cultural practices that comprise our common world, asking us to notice what we see, and when his approach can help us recognize the way language reflects the context of technical practice. Basically, Wittgenstein argued that language is a form of life, because we name patterns that we see in our everyday life, or such patterns change with time and settings. Marx, on the other hand, recommends that we see the action and interaction of everyday life with an enormous tapestry of historical developments. These developments set the stage for people's ability to express themselves for their ways of being human. His mode of interpretation also includes a place for a more microscopic treatment of specific technologies in human experiences. So now, technology as a philosophy. In this context, Wittgenstein and Marx are both sufficient bases for a critical theory. Wittgenstein decided that philosophy is leave everything as it is. He lives with a little more than like a passive traditionalism. Most Marxism have believed that capitalism is a threat and should be destroyed. But technological expansion is entirely good in itself, and we should encourage of that. In its view of technological development, Marxism anticipates a history of rapidly evolving material productivity, inevitable course of events which attempts to propose moral and political limits have no place. The philosophies of Marx and Wittgenstein share a fruitful insight. The observation that social activity is an ongoing process of world making throughout their lives. People come together to renew the fabric of relationship, transaction, meaning that sustain their common existence. From this point of view, the important question about technology becomes, as we make things work, what kind of world are we making? This suggests that we pay attention not only to the physical instruments and processes, but also the production of psychological, social, and political conditions as part of any significant technical change where there are substantial changes being made. In what people are doing at a substantial investment of resources, then it also pays to us advance about the qualities of artifacts, institutions, and human experiences. Inquiries of this kind present an important challenge to all disciplines in the social sciences and humanities. Indeed, there are many historians, anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, and artists whose work sheds light on long overlooked human dimension of technology. Even engineers and other technical professionals have much to contribute here when they find courage to go beyond the narrow gauge categories of their training. The study of politics offers its own characteristic route into this territory. As the political imagination confronts technologies as form of life, it should be able to say something about the choices, implicit or explicit, made in the course of technological innovation and the grounds for making those choices wisely. And that's all for this chapter entitled Technologies as Forms of Life. Bye!